In this video, I'm going to count down the 9 best kickboxers to ever compete in MMA. For this list, we are going to be ranking the fighters strictly in terms of their kickboxing career. We will make mention of their MMA exploits, but that ultimately won't have any effect on the rankings. We will also only be considering kickboxers who have at least 7 fights in MMA. Okay, let's jump straight into it with number 9. Coming in at number 9, we have stylebender Israel Adesanya, who would likely be near the top of this list if we were ranking these fighters based on their MMA careers. Israel was an extremely talented kickboxer who competed with an off-cadence rhythm and near-perfect technique and precision. Ironically, the larger 10-ounce kickboxing gloves, which allowed for a much larger guard coverage, wasn't favourable to Izzy's style, and it wasn't until his transition to MMA and 4-ounce gloves that we really saw what a generational striking talent Izzy was. Israel never captured a major kickboxing title. He got extremely close in a contest against Jason Wilness for the Glory middleweight title, but again the larger gloves didn't allow for his counter-striking to flourish and he just wouldn't get over the line on scorecards. Adesanya's kickboxing career is more or less defined by being extremely competitive against the best of his time, Wilness and Pereira notably, but he never reached the top of the sport like he did with MMA. But when considering his talent, it's hard not to recognize Stylebender as a top solid middleweight. Cosmo Alessandre, again like Izzy, never reached a top-level title, but was known as one of the best technicians in the sport. His viral foot sweep to knee combo will go down as an all-time great moment in striking sports. Comfortably regarded as one of the best Brazilian kickboxers ever, Goodbye Cosmo would win titles in smaller promotions such as It's Showtime and Lion Fight, as well as get some big victories over some high-level competitions such as John Wayne Parr. While again never getting a major title and falling short against some of the top in and around super middleweights of the world, Cosmo was definitely near the top of his division in a competitive era. In MMA, Cosmo holds a record of 8-1 and is likely best known for his absolute brutalization in a performance of the night against Sage Northcutt in one championship. Mirko Cro Cop is easily the most successful kickboxer from the golden age of K1's heavyweight division when comparing success in MMA. And when you consider he has won Grand Prix in both sports across K1, Pride and Rizin, he is a bit underrated as one of the most important figures in modern combat sports. Focusing on Cro Cop's kickboxing career, he was a solid top 10 in the heavyweight division during the absolute pinnacle of heavyweight talent in K1, notably finishing runner-up in the 1999 Grand Prix. With the legendary line of right leg hospital, left leg cemetery, Cro Cop would put away some of the best heavyweights of his era including Musashi and Remy Bonjasky, as well as holding a win over Peter Ertz. Cro Cop's longevity was also at the top of the sport, winning the 2012 K1 World Grand Prix, while not technically in the canon of K1 World Grand Prix, was still an incredible feat at 38 years old. As great of a kickboxer Cro Cop was, he was an even more successful MMA fighter, and will likely be remembered as one of the great MMA heavyweights of all time, with his kickboxing career becoming more of an introductory chapter. His blitzing style and ability to close the distance rapidly translated so well into MMA and so much better than his kickboxing rivals of the time. In MMA, winning the 2006 Pride Openweight Grand Prix and the 2016 Rizin Openweight Grand Prix far exceeded any of his achievements in kickboxing. But that's not to take away from what a great heavyweight kickboxer Cro Cop was. We are now at the point where we're talking about kickboxing all-time greats, and what Pereira achieved in a relatively short kickboxing career is remarkable, capturing both the Glory middleweight title with 5 defenses and the Glory light heavyweight championship. Although this occurred during a relatively weak time in both divisions, at his peak Pereira would be considered in the top 3 pound for pound and one of the best kickboxers of his generation. His signature left hook and ability to generate powerful shots at weird angles helped him become known as one of the scariest power strikers in the sport, with huge KO wins including avenging early losses to Jason Wilness and KOing Donaghy Abena. Only starting training at 21 years old to curb an alcohol addiction, if Pereira found himself starting half a decade or so earlier, he could have achieved an all-time great career. Again, transitioning into MMA relatively late as well, he did what many other combat sport athletes fail to do when transitioning to MMA and translated what made him great in kickboxing into another Hall of Fame career in MMA. Alex Pereira reached the absolute pinnacle in 2 separate sports, putting together a solid argument for one of the best combat sports athletes of the modern era and in the conversation for all time. Mark Hunt doesn't get talked about enough when discussing the greatest heavyweight kickboxers of all time. Far from the most physically impressive, far from the most technical, but in spite of all these flaws, Hunt achieved the single greatest achievement that I think you can do in kickboxing, a K1 World GP during the original iteration of the tournament. A feat only 8 individuals have achieved in 18 tournaments. Known for his nuclear bomb of a left hook and right straight, Hunt was able to put down some of the best of his era, including Jerome Labana and Stefan Lecco. Combining this power with a legendary iron chin, he would be an extremely difficult fight even in defeat. Hunt's MMA career might have been defined by huge highs and disappointing lows, with an initial spur of success, a period where his grappling weakness was exposed, and then an unbelievable career revival close to a decade after transitioning to the sport. Hunt is a legend of 2 combat sports and deserves much more respect for his career than he currently receives. I get a lot of crap for calling Alistair Overeem one of the greatest kickboxers ever, primarily because his official kickboxing record is only 10-4, and when our all-time greats in kickboxing have like 70 to 100 wins, a mere 10 seems underwhelming. But when you consider he has victories over Peter Ertz, Gokhan Saki, Badr Hari, Tyrone Spong, and of course winning a K1 World GP, not to mention placing 3rd in another, this puts him right up there undoubtedly in my opinion. Much like his MMA career, Overeem would bully his opponents with knee strikes from the clinch and control distance with leg and body kicks when at range. He would use these energy sapping techniques before barraging with some power boxing once his opponents wore down. Again, Overeem is likely going to be remembered for his legendary MMA career over his relatively short kickboxing career, but his strength of schedule and achievements inarguably put him near the top of a very tall mountain in heavyweight kickboxing greats. Jerome Labana is a legendary figure in K1's golden age, holding victories over next to all the all-time greats, including Ernesto Hoost twice, Mark Hunt 3 times, Peter Ertz, Remy Bonjasky, and Musashi twice. The only thing Jerome didn't achieve during his legendary K1 run was a World GP, finishing runner-up twice. Known for his left-hand finishing ability, which was dubbed the Golden Left, after his left straight KO of Francisco Filo, this KO at the time was called the biggest KO of this 1000 years, a legendary line in kickboxing history. Jerome's kickboxing career has amassed a record of 87 wins to 23 losses in a career that has spanned over 32 years well into his 50s. The Frenchman's MMA career is nothing to be too excited about, especially compared to his kickboxing career in a 6-3 record. You won't be able to tell the story of K1's golden age and kickboxing in general without Jerome Labana's name coming up many times. And although the Grand Prix win eludes him, it takes nothing away from what is one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. As difficult as it is to like Cedric Doumbé, he is undoubtedly one of the best welterweights to ever do it. Not only just clearing the division out, but absolutely dominating it. The former 2-time Glory welterweight champion held the #1 pound-for-pound spot in the division for several years, and he was awarded the 2016 Fighter of the Year by multiple outlets. Cedric has quite an unorthodox style. He is a very loose and free-flowing striker, and if you only watched him for say 1 round, you would have no idea that he is one of the most successful kickboxers of the modern era. While not technically perfect in a textbook sense, Cedric might have the best natural fight sense the sport has ever seen. He would often just find ways to just win, whether that be through dirty boxing or rapidly adapting strategies between rounds. And when you combine that with the bombs he had for hands, he made a career of dominating and finishing fighters who were much better, at least in a traditional technical sense. The longer you look at Cedric's 75-7 record, the more impressive it looks. At his peak, he only ever lost relatively tight decisions and avenged them in destructive fashion. Cedric has looked pretty impressive in his MMA career thus far. His saga with signing and then not signing for the UFC likely turned out to be a bit of a blessing in disguise, and theoretically, if he can develop his broader skill set, he definitely has the style that should translate well into MMA. Definitely one to keep our eyes on. Semmy Schilt might not only be the best kickboxer to have competed in MMA, but he is a serious contender for the greatest kickboxer of all time, period. In this video, I've made it known that I consider a K1 World GP win during the original iteration of the organization to be the greatest single achievement in the sport of kickboxing. Well, Semi did it 4 times, including the only ever 3-peat between 2005 and 2007. On top of that, Semi is also a former Glory Heavyweight Champion and a Grand Slam Tournament Champion. Semi, who was given the nickname Hightower, was a mountain of a man, standing at 6'11", and he knew how to utilize every single inch of his 88-inch reach to absolute peak effectiveness. And when you combine that with his surprising level of conditioning and technique, he could stay at range and chip away at his opponents over multiple rounds, leaving some of the best heavyweights to ever live clueless on how to handle the giant. In MMA, Semi is a legend of late 90s Pancrase and early 2000s Pride. He even appeared in the UFC a couple of times, but he just couldn't get around his grappling weakness in his game and thus never reached the heights, no pun intended, that he would in kickboxing. I personally rank Shildt in the top 3 kickboxers of all time, and he is undoubtedly the best kickboxer to have an MMA career. So there we go, that is my list of the top 10 kickboxers to have at least 7 fights in MMA. Let me know if I've missed anyone or if you disagree with any of my rankings. Thank you all as always for the support, it means the absolute world, and I'll see you all in the next video.